So we're continuing to read on the Marita Conan McKenna book, Fields of Home. We're now on to chapter 13, which is called Night Watch. Eily paced up and down the flagstone floor as darkness wrapped itself around the cottage and filled the small window panes. "What ails you, child?" inquired Nano anxiously. "You've wiped that tabletop at least 3 times, and you're making Mary Bridget and myself dizzy with your toing and froing. You're like a hen on a hot griddle. For heaven's sake, will you sit down and relax for a while?" A hen on a hot griddle is a phrase for someone that's very anxious or worried and can't sit down and can't relax. "I'm really worried," Eily sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "John should have been home at least 2 hours ago, and still there's no sign of him. Do you think something might have happened to him?" John is Eily's husband, father of Mary Bridget. "Shush, Eily," cautioned Nano, touching her finger to her lips as she noticed Mary Bridget lift her head and look over from the mat near the fire where she was playing with Scrap, the orange kitten. "He'll be along soon, I'm sure, Eily. You'll see. He'll have a good reason for missing his meal." "Aye, maybe you're right," murmured Eily, trying to calm herself as she peered out into the blackness yet again. "Mary Bridget, you should have been in bed hours ago. You'll be falling asleep in school tomorrow. Come on, I'll tuck you in." Mary Bridget gave a huge yawn. She didn't want to go to bed when her daddy wasn't home. What if he'd got lost in the woods or the fairies had taken him? "No," she said stubbornly. "I must stay awake till Daddy comes." Her mother knelt down near her. "Listen, pet, I know you're worried and scared, just the same as I am, but you have to sleep. I promise that just as soon as Daddy comes in, he'll go and say goodnight to you." Mary Bridget still tickled the kitten's pale tummy fur, considering. That means she was thinking about it. "Can Scrap sleep at the bottom of the bed tonight, then?" "Why, you little weasel," teased her mother. "Poor Nano mightn't fancy sharing the bed with the cat." "Please, Nano," begged Mary Bridget. "Please, please." "Why is it that the child can always wheedle her way around me?" said Nano, leaving down the socks she was darning. Darning is a type of sewing that's done on socks. "You can take the cat for a while for company, but he'll have to make do with the kitchen when I decide to go to bed." "Thank you, Nano. You're the best auntie in the world," smiled Mary Bridget sleepily, clutching the kitten as she followed her mother. 2 more hours had passed, and Nano had dozed off. She'd insisted on waiting up with Eily. Suddenly, from outside, Eily heard 2 strange male voices. Scared, she reached for the long iron poker resting on the hearth. Poker is a big tool that's used to move wood and coal around in a fire. It's like a grabber tool almost. They were coming nearer the house. What did they want? Maybe they were drunk or something. Then they tapped lightly on the door. "Missus, open up," someone called. "Don't be afraid, we won't harm you." "Go away," she whispered loudly. "Missus, we've your man, John, with us. Open up and let us in." Eily stood stock still, not knowing whether to believe him or not. "Eily, Eily." She recognised her husband's voice immediately and she rushed to open the door. John was there, being supported by 2 strangers. He was barely able to stand. "God almighty," Eily screamed. "There was a bit of a fight, Mrs. Powers, at the tenants' meeting, and—" "What? Who were you fighting? John, how did you get involved in this? Are you hurt bad?" Eily screamed in confusion at her young husband. The men ignored her and lowered John down onto the old fireside chair. "Ah," he moaned in pain. "He'll be fine, missus. It just looks a lot worse than it is," mumbled the older grey-haired man as he shuffled, half embarrassed, to the door. "Thank you very much for bringing him home," Eily said woodenly, longing for these strangers and the trouble they'd brought to be out of her house. As if reading her mind, they slipped away back into the night. With relief, she closed the door behind them. "John, what in heaven's name happened?" "I was at a tenants' meeting," he muttered through swollen, bleeding lips. "But it was afterwards it happened when we started to walk home." Paddy Hennessy ran into that Gombean man Hussey, the agent. He started shouting at him and calling him names. Hussey told him to stop, but you know what Paddy's like when he's riled. Riled means all het up or very angry. He must have gone crazy because he went for Hussey, jumping right on him, swinging out of his jacket. Then Hussey took a swipe at him and Hennessy went mad altogether. Next thing I knew, the two of them were on the ground kicking and punching the daylights out of each other. Myself and a few of the lads tried to break it up, and then Hussey's friends came out of the hotel and decided to have a go at us. We had to try and defend ourselves, Eiley. So obviously one of the tenants got very cross with the agent, who would be a landlord's agent, someone who collects the rents on behalf of the landlord. And that's where the fight was. And all of the landlord's friends, or the agent's friends, came to help him. And then John had to get involved as well to help the man who initially started the fight. John's face was badly bruised and cut, one eye totally swollen and closed. Both his hands were bloodied, knuckles torn and sore. Under his shirt, his skin was almost pulped, where the mark of heavy, hobnailed boots had been stamped across his ribcage. Eiley filled a basin with warm water and began to bathe and clean his wounds with a towel. Nano stirred. Her eyes opened wide when she saw the state John was in. She came over to comfort him. "I'm all right, Nano," he grimaced. A grimace is a grin that really isn't a happy grin at all. Trying to make light of it. "I just got caught in the middle of a fight." The old lady fussed over him and insisted on making him a cup of tea. He did his best to drink it, though it burned his cracked, sore lips. Once his face was cleaned and all the blood was washed away, the swelling and bruising could be seen clearly. "What a mess," he tried to joke as they both looked at him. "Who did this to you, my love?" Eiley asked, stroking his cheek gently. "A few right boyos, friends of Hussey's, but I think it was a constable that got my nose." A constable is a policeman. "A constable? Oh my God, John, what will happen now?" Eiley moaned. "I don't know." He sighed wearily. Wearily means in a tired way, hiding his face in his hands. "You don't know?" screamed Eiley, almost hysterical. Hysterical means a bit out of control. "We might have a constable banging on our door in the morning and all you can say is you don't know." "Hush, Eiley," soothed Nano. "Did anyone recognise you, John?" "Well, maybe Hussey did. But Nano, I swear I didn't lay a finger on him. Paddy beat him up real bad. I didn't know any of the others as far as I can remember." "Are you sure, John?" questioned Nano, gazing seriously at him. "Aye, Nano, I'm fair sure and certain." "Then we just have to pray that trouble stays away from this door," she murmured. "That's all we can do. The police will be after Paddy. They'll hunt him down." Eiley sat down opposite John, her eyes almost closed, as she tried to hide the mounting sense of fear within her and her anger at John's putting their tenancy at risk. Remember, John and Eiley are tenants on the land as well. They don't own the land. They pay rent. "I think I'll away to my bed," said Nano diplomatically, and she disappeared into the small back room she shared with Mary Bridget. Eiley listened as John told her about the new landlord, Dennis Ormond's plans to merge many of the small holdings and farms, getting rid of what he considered the poor and useless tenants like old Agnes. So the landlord is obviously trying to make lots of little farms into one big farm, but because of that they have to get rid of some of the people off the land, and they would consider poor people and old widows not to be any use because they wouldn't be very good at paying their rent and they wouldn't be able to help the landlord out either. Hussey himself was supposed to be getting one of these newer, enlarged farms, so naturally it was in his best interest to rid Ormond's land of as many small tenants as possible. The landlord was keen to sell. There were rumours of large betting debts. Without a doubt, he was going to put up the rents, which would drive more people away. "Put the rent up again? John, how can we possibly manage that?" sobbed Eiley. "No one is going to put me off the land that my family have farmed for generations," John said firmly. "Eiley, this land should rightfully be ours, and I'll not give it up without a fight." "Will he sell this holding?" she whispered. Maybe, John shrugged his shoulders, but some are saying that us tenants should have the first right to buy at a fair price. The argument is that they've farmed and kept the land for decades and decades, and their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents had worked the same land, and why should they be put off it just because a landlord wants to make one large farm so that he can sell it off easily? Sure, what use would that be if we don't have the money? They have us caught, said Eiley angrily. You know we could never afford to buy our farm. John stared moodily at the dying embers of the fire. This is our home, Eiley, and we've both worked hard on this land. They might evict a poor old woman like Agnes because she can no longer grow crops or fix up her cabin, but they'll not evict us. I've no intention of letting them take our land. Promise, she said softly. I promise, said John hoarsely, reaching for her hand.